London, CNN. The British government is on the brink of missing a crucial target in its fight against coronavirus. A headline-grabbing aim of conducting 100,000 daily COVID-19 tests by the end of April is unlikely to be achieved, with the government saying that only 52,429 had been carried out on Tuesday, 2 days before the deadline. Capacity is available for about 73,000, Downing Street says. Government sources argue, with some justification, that the target, up from about 10,000 a day at the beginning of the month, was always incredibly ambitious, and the fact that capacity has been expanded so quickly is a huge achievement. But, critics say, that only serves to illustrate the inadequacies of Britain's testing regime in the first place. The missed testing target is not the only failing. The UK is on track to have one of the highest coronavirus death tolls in Europe, with more than 26,000 deaths recorded by Wednesday. Its patchwork of care homes for the elderly has been ravaged by the disease. There have been near-daily reports of insufficient personal protective equipment on the front line, meaning doctors, nurses and care home workers risk catching it every time they go to work. The country's leader himself contracted the disease, becoming so ill that his advisors were not completely sure that he would recover from it. At the time, daily briefings breezily proclaimed Prime Minister Boris Johnson was in good spirits when in fact, by Johnson's own account later, the situation was significantly more grave. And, despite ministers' repeated insistence that they are being guided by the science in their coronavirus response, secrecy still shrouds the nature of that scientific advice. The current membership of the Scientific Advisory Group on Emergencies, SAGE, the government's main scientific advisory body, which changes depending on the crisis, has not been listed publicly. The group hasn't published the basis of any of its advice for more than a month. There is, as yet, no published framework for exiting the lockdown that has brought the fifth largest economy in the world to a grinding halt. So far, the government appears to have successfully batted away suggestions that its coronavirus strategy has been a failure by pointing to one crucial measure of success: the country's beloved National Health Service, NHS, has so far ridden out the crisis without being overwhelmed. The desperate scenes witnessed in northern Italy, where a world-class health system was brought to its knees, have not been repeated in the UK. This is an unprecedented global pandemic and we have taken the right steps at the right time to combat it, guided by the best scientific advice, a government spokesperson told CNN, in response to a request to address the criticisms raised in this article. Ministers and officials have been working day and night to battle coronavirus, delivering a strategy designed to protect our NHS and save lives, the spokesperson said. We have provided the NHS with all the support it needs, and made sure everyone requiring treatment has received it. But could more have been done to prevent the scale of loss of life? Should ministers have acted sooner? And could there be more transparency in the overall strategy? Critics are zeroing in on three key areas as they seek to find out what went wrong in the UK. First, there was the abandonment of mass testing. At the start of the outbreak in the UK, public health officials tracked and traced every known case. Ministers have never offered a clear reason for why that policy was abandoned. Was it because the testing capacity had been reached? Was it because the system could not cope with the expected upturn in demand? Was it structural, since the public health system in England has, over the years, gradually been centralized? Abandoning testing gave the virus the green light to spread uncontrollably, says the Royal Society of Medicine's Gabriel Scally. If you don't have access to testing, you won't know that you have an outbreak until a lot of people are ill. Some in the scientific community say an obsession with central control led officials to set up the testing regime initially in just a few labs, rather than allowing local hospitals to do it themselves. Sadly, it seems likely to me that once the government models showed how bad the crisis would be, our testing capacity wouldn't be anywhere near able to cope with the coming surge, a leading microbiologist told CNN on condition of anonymity to describe confidential discussions. God only knows what their thinking was not telling hospitals to get ready. It was a mistake. Downing Street declined to provide an on-the-record explanation to CNN on this issue. The second crucial question is whether the government failed to order a lockdown early enough. Even though the government did not know by that March 12 briefing just how many people were infected, Whitty said it was still too early to lock down because if people go too early, they become very fatigued. If tough restrictions came too early, the theory went, the British public would begin to tire of it just as they were starting to become effective, and demands for them to be lifted would become impossible to resist. Government sources defended that course of action to CNN, pointing out that some mitigation measures were put in place between March 12 and the full lockdown on March 23, like advising vulnerable groups to stay at home and requiring people with certain symptoms to self-quarantine. The third big question is the pursuit of so-called herd immunity. It's not possible to stop everybody getting it, said Valance at the March 12 briefing. However, the experience of countries like South Korea and Germany, where testing and tracking systems have been significantly more rigorous, and in New Zealand, where lockdown measures were taken at a much earlier stage, suggests that it has been possible to stop quite a large number of people from getting it. Medical experts both inside and outside the government's circle of trusted advisors have admitted to CNN that they believe the government waited too long to enter lockdown. Many of the decisions the government has made ignore basic public health science, says a Dr. Bharat Pankania, senior clinical lecturer at University of Exeter. From abandoning track and trace, to the timing of the lockdown, to providing the correct protective equipment, ignoring basic public health science may have led to more deaths than necessary. Pankania believes that despite government claims it has been guided by science at every step, the decision to delay a lockdown was likely governed by economic consideration, rather than public health science. This conflict between the government's claim that it has followed the science from day one, and some in the scientific community's skepticism as to how good that evidence is, has become a key battlefield between those inside and outside the UK government.